Hey everybody, here we are in my garage again. I am recovering from the COVID, which is why I didn't put out a video last week. I was busy laying on my couch. But I'm on the mend, and I've decided, if you can see those two pieces of wood, to build a seat riser for my seat, because while the seat is a great height for saltwater fishing, it's a little low if I need to stand up and sit back down again without basically falling down in freshwater fishing. It's not going to be as high as some of those bass buggy high seats that people have been putting in their boat. It's also not going to be 3D printed. I thought I'd compare how long it takes to 3D print something versus actually just make one out of wood. Welcome back to the channel. So what I'm planning on doing is using some standard 3/4 inch MDF to make blocks that fit into these grooves right here. And I'm going to use oil-based paint to seal it, and I'm going to connect them together crosswise and maybe down the middle as well. I was talking with a friend of mine about 3D printing the blocks that would fit in here, but he was saying that the design process and test prints and the production would take hours and hours, because it's an inch and 3/4 thick by 4 inches tall, or whatever it may be here. So I thought to myself, I could probably build it and fit it the old-fashioned way in less time than it would take to print. Not that I won't print, because I think 3D printing is rad and also much more waterproof than wood, but I'm going to seal it with oil-based paint, as I said, and it's just to see if I can do it. All I want to do is raise my seat up about 4 inches. It's not going to be one of those real high bass fishing style seats that some people are doing. It's only going to come up to this high, maybe from about this high. So it's just that much. Will allow me to stand up easier in the boat, sit down easier in the boat. I have concern that it may raise my center of gravity a little bit while I'm sitting, but probably not enough to be a concern. There's my plan. First thing I need to do is to make some blocks that are bigger than the grooves that I have here, bigger than these both depth, height, and width, and then I will carve each one to fit in. And yes, I know that sounds like it's going to take a long time, but when you have copious power tools as I do, it shouldn't take too long, because we're going to do it with high speed grinding and cutting tools that should make this a fast process. Also, I used to do a lot of hand carving of wood stuff when I was a cabinet maker, so hopefully experience and power will save the day. So right here I have a piece of 3/4 inch MDF that I scrounged out of my garage. What I'm going to do first is make the blocks, the blanks that are going to fit in those notches in the kayak. Basically all it is a matter of cutting some chunks of wood that are bigger and gluing them together. So I use Titebond wood glue, which is, in my opinion, the best wood glue. I know a lot of people are like all about their Gorilla Glue and whatnot, but having done a lot of gluing in my life, I've always used Titebond, and it works really well. It's water resistant, and if the blocks break, they're going to break somewhere other than where I glued it. That's what I'm going to do. I'll get that done, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so now I've got those two pieces of wood glued together and they're going to take a while to dry. What I've done is I've measured the notches that the blocks are going to fit into and recorded them so professionally on this chunk of wood that maybe you can see that, I don't know. Anyway, so once that glue dries up, we'll be ready to start carving these things out. See you in a bit. Okay, here we are back in business. My glue up has dried mostly. I've got the workbench set up and we're going to get started on laying out the oversized version of these blocks, and then we will start cutting and grinding. Alright, here it is. Hopefully this workbench will provide sufficient space. So typically this kind of glue, and I should have mentioned earlier that when I said Titebond is water resistant, I meant Titebond 2. The Titebond 1, I believe, is not water resistant. So anyway, the blue bottle, if you're interested. So typically you let this glue dry for like 24 hours to be fully solid, but I know from experience that when you glue this up, you give it a few hours and it's hard enough that it will stay glued. So it's been a couple 3 hours since I did this, since I put this together this morning, so I'm gonna go ahead and break the clamps off of it and start getting it cleaned up so that we can put our layout for the wedge blocks that are gonna fit in the boat, and we'll get going and not take so much time. So it is now 1.5 inches thick since I glued up the layers. Let me get my scale, my super accurate Starrett scale. So 14.5 inches. So I drew out the picture of what I wanted somewhere. Oh, here it is. So I'll show you this again. This is the picture of what I wanted. The design will be 2 1/4, so I'm going to aim for a little bit bigger. Let me double check that measurement. Okay, so 4.5 inches tall. I'm going to go with 2 3/8 inches wide at the top because I want to be able to sand some down. 4.5 inches tall and 2 3/8 inches wide. So 2 3/8 on center will be 1 3/16. Okay, so there's our first one, and so if I measure over another 1 3/16, that's going to be the full width of our V, and then I'll give it another, I don't know, 1/4 inch, and that's where we'll start our next V, so that'll be 1 3/16, and then at the bottom it's going to be 1 inch. So there's 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch to that side, and now all I need to do is connect these together like this and make the V shape. That's the first one, roughly. It's bigger than it needs to be. And then this line is all wrong. So now if I do that again from this point, let's just burn that inch. So as I said before, it's 1 3/16 to the center, but I'm going to give it another 1/4, so there's 1 3/16 plus another 1/4. That should be center. And when we measure from the center line over to the next one, that's 2 20 seconds. 21 30 seconds. So when I will come down here and make that same measurement, and you might think I'm measuring 3 in 21 30 seconds, but I'm starting from the 1, so it's only 2. and 21/32. Measuring from a line on the scale is more accurate than measuring from the end of the scale, because you have to feel for flush or look at flush or what you perceive to be flush. But when you start from a line, you know exactly where that line is. So that's the way I do that. Okay, so there's our first two lower pieces, and I can already tell this one might be a little funny. Fortunately, I made them bigger than they need to be, so funniness will wash out. So we'll get rid of that, we'll get rid of this bit. There's our first two rear seat riser blocks, this one and that one. And then the next one's going to be like a square. Like for most of it, it's going to be square, and then there's going to be a fat V at the bottom. So let me go take those measurements. That wedge shape is going to be 2 inches at the top, 2 1/8 inches at the top, and about 1 1/4 inches at the bottom to make it probably around 1 1/8 inches wide at the bottom. So we'll lay out 1 1/8 inches. We'll draw another center line because I want the block about 4 inches wide, which is probably overkill, but if we've got the material, we might as well take advantage of it. So from the top of my existing, or what I've drawn out to be my lower block, I'm going to measure 1/4 inch over to give us a little cutting room. And then, so that's, again, I'm starting at a mark and not on the end of the tape so that it's more accurate. Measure over 14, so 10 plus 4 is measure over 14. Measure over 4, 10 plus 4 is 14. So there's the block that's going to be there. So now I know where my block is. Let me grab my square. And I know it's hard to see what we're dealing with all this black paint on this piece of MDF. But there's the 4-inch block, 4 inch wide. It's not going to be that tall. And then I'm going to do another 1/4 inch between it and the next block. And there's our 4 inch. 10 minus 4 is 6. So that's 4 inches. We'll draw those lines. And there's our block. And so now, on the other end, I said I was going to measure it out to be 1 1/4 inches on center. So let's do our center mark based on the 4-inch block that I just carved or drew. So there's the center mark at 10 9/8. That's 2 inches. And then center from this one is going to be 1-2 inches. That all seems very confusing, I know, but it's the way I was taught to do it by my dear old dad way back in the day. Okay, so there's our center lines. And now we need to make that wedge shape that's just going to go like that. So we'll measure over, use the scale, and I said, what, 1 1/4 inches? We're going to end up with 1 1/8 inches. So it's really unfortunate that my scale is so teeny tiny. Let's use the bigger one. See if that's a little more visible. That's better. Alright, so 1 1/8 inches to this side, 1 1/8 inches to that side is going to give us the 1/4. Nope, that's not right. 1/2 1.25 inches is 5/16. So we're going to make 5/16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is right there. Conveniently marked out. And I know I said 5/16, but I meant 5/8. So again, 5/8 is what we're going for, because 5/8 twice is 1 1/4 inch, which is the ultimate size we want to end up at. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that looks right. And the depth of that notch is 2 5/8 inches. So we're going to measure down. Oh, let's do this one real quick too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8. All right, and then we come down 2 5/8. And then the width I said we needed was 2 inches wide down here. So we're going to go, I'm going to give it a 2 1/8 inch wide, so it's wider than I need to be, so I can take some more off. So half of 2 1/8 is 1 1/16. And so there it is. That is our 2 front blocks. They're quite a bit taller than, they're going to stick up quite a bit. But I think that's going to give us the perfect plane that the seat currently sits on, because the seat doesn't sit flat like that. It kind of sits like that, so that your knees are higher than your hips on the back. It's tilted just a little bit like that. And if I were to just make 4 of these blocks, it would go like this, and it would level it out, and then it might not be as comfortable to sit in. So I'm trying to mimic that exact shape on all 4 corners, or mimic that exact level, so that all 4 corners rise up exactly the way that they are currently without the blocks in there. So there is the drawing. I don't know if you can see it in the thing there. Oh yeah, I guess you can. There it is. We'll start cutting them out. Well, it's official. I've dropped this camera now like 3 different times, and I gotta say, it's taken a beating. Oh, you can't see who I am anymore. This one's a Fei Tech. It wasn't that expensive, and it works really well, and apparently takes a pounding. So I have roughed out these blocks. This is a forward block, and I'm just going to drop it in here and see what happens. And I'll take you along for the ride. There's our notch right there. And it looks as though I miscalculated on the depth. So I'm going to have to cut this deeper this way so that it settles down in the bottom, and the bench and the seat rests on here, and the weight is transferred all the way to the bottom of this little trough here. So there's that. And these ones are not complete yet because I've cut them all oversized. You can see that I cut outside of all of the lines, so I have extra room to sand. And here is the rear V block. It's going to go back here just like that, and this one should, yep, that's perfect. See, that's got to get sanded out right there, sanded out and radiused, but it looks as though those are going to work. And I have a lot of radiusing to do. I've got to match all these corner curvy radiuses, which may be the first thing I do, plus this, which I determined is slightly smaller than a 1-inch radius. So I might just take my compass and draw the radius on there. But we're off to a great start. Okay, we're back in business. Our two rear brackets and the rear brackets will be easier to work, so I think I'm going to start with those. And to be honest, I'm kind of inclined to try to put them together like this and do them all at the same time. See if I have some double stick tape. Alright, put the two halves or the two pieces together and sand them all at once so that they're as identical as they possibly can be. Do the same thing with these. Look at that, they're decidedly asymmetrical. They're better that way. Alright, we'll think about that at a later time. Just going to sand this. Oh, I wanted to mark up the radius, so that's what I'm going to do. Do it on the pretty side. So we're going for a 1-inch radius on the bottom, 1-inch diameter on the bottom here. So of course that's a 1/2-inch radius. Just about like that. So now I should be able to put that on the sander and just sand these both to this exact same radius. And I'll use my square to make sure it's parallel. Or square. Alright, so we're at the point. We've got it down to the lines that we drew. It's not perfectly round, but I believe that will fit nicely. But we're right to the lines that we drew earlier, so I'm going to go chunk this in there and see how it fits. So here's our block that I just finished, and it fits darn near perfect. Looks like it's got to go down. Looks like I got to narrow it up a little bit, like this way some more. But it is gonna work. A little more refinement. Let's see. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna radius these edges down to match the edges that are in here, the corners that are in here, so it snugs in there a little better, a little nicer, a little better. There we go. Check number 2. Here we go. So what I've done here, I've got it all rounded off like a nice used bar of soap, and we pop it in here like this, and hopefully it'll sit down nice and tight against here, which looks like there's still a little bit of a gap. So what I'm going to do is narrow these down this way so that it drops in there a little more tightly. But it's real close. I mean, that's gonna work. Just a little narrower, a little thinner, and we'll have it. Got through a little more sanding. Oh, that's money. This is all I can. Still see a little light down there. Gonna have to take a little more off, I think, because if I want to add paint to this, it's not gonna fit anymore because it's that tight. So, beautiful thing is I can see right where it's hitting because I've pushed it in there. The plastic shines up the wood a little bit right where it's hitting, so all I need to do is sand the spots where the plastic is hitting the wood, and that's what I'm going to do. Sanded off the shiny spots. That is pretty darn good. Does shine up a little bit right there. Still shiny there, there, and there. So I'm going to keep grinding on it. Do the same thing there, there, and there. Keep going at it. I don't see any other spots where it looks like it's hitting. It's just those right there. Keep after it. That is money. Those two are complete. So now the next step is to separate them and figure out, actually maybe I won't separate them because I still need to put the little groove in it right here for the seat to set on. So then we'll have to figure that out next.